så... Okay, good evening and welcome to New Life Online Bible School. Tonight I will teach about wedding, or I call it the purified bride or the glorified church. And in this teaching I will go into four main topics. The first will be bride and bridegroom. We had to know who is the bride and who's the bridegroom. And the next phase is the engagement and the time leading up to the wedding. And the third, when and where will the wedding take place. And finally, fourth, who is invited to the wedding party. So let's look a little of the word bride and groom and wedding party in the Bible. We find that the bride mentioned more than 60 times. The bridegroom or groom mentioned around 25 times. Bridegroom mentioned around 25 times, and wedding around 20 times, and the wedding party mentions only 2 times, that in Matthew 22:8 and 25:10. I think we can read what's written there. Matthew 22:8. Matthew 22. (22:8). Then he said to his servants, "The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy." And in 25:10. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. I will go further a little bit into the biblical text of these words, look as how a Jewish wedding was celebrated at the time of Jesus, and how we can interpret the text in terms of the prophetic time we live in, including the rapture of the church. What is important to understand, that it's not what we call a Western traditional wedding that is referred in the Bible. It's a Jewish wedding. And we had to take off our natural and cultural glasses to understand how the Jewish wedding was celebrated at that time. Only then we will be able to understand the prophetic words. So, who is the bride and who is the guest or the bridesmaid? In Matthew 15:24, we read, he answered, this is Jesus that answered. Jesus answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Here we read that Jesus was sent only to the Jewish people, not to the Samaritans or others, even not the Gentiles were not included. So what about John the Baptist? Is he included in the bride? Well, we can read John 3:29. "He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the groomsman who stand by and listen to him rejoices greatly and heartily on account of the bridegroom's voice. This then is my pleasure and joy, and it is now complete." So here actually John the Baptist said that himself is not counting himself as the bride, but only as the groom's friend. So what about the disciples? Are they part of the bride? Or are they groom's friend? Well, let's go to Jesus' own words, saying that John the Baptist, then the disciple of John came to Jesus, inquiring, why is that we and the Pharisees fast often, that is, abstain from food and drink as a religious exercise, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus replied to them, can the wedding guests mourn while the bridegroom is still with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. So here is actually written in black and white of Jesus' own words, stating that the disciples are the wedding guests and not included as the bride. So what about Israel? Are they the bride? Can Israel be considered as the bride or included in the terms bride along with others? Well, let's go to the Old Testament and read from Isaiah 54:5, verse 5. For your Maker, or the God himself, is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer, and God of the whole earth he is called. So God, Lord Yahweh, is the husband of Israel. And Israel is to be considered as an unfaithful wife, divorced wife who has become unfaithful and failed her husband, the Lord Yahweh. But God cannot break his covenant, and you can read marriage covenant with Israel, and will once again be united with his bride Israel. We can also see in Rome 11:2 stated that God has not rejected his people. Then we have clarified that neither John the Baptist nor the disciple or nor Israel are included in the bride. So, who is then the bride? We'll go into the first main subject for this evening. In Ephesians 5:25 to 32, Ephesians 5:25. I just have to change my glasses, the reading glasses. I can see this is very small letters here in my Bible. 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hates his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are a member of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. So note here that he will present his church in glory without spot or wrinkle, and that we should be holy. And here Jesus compare his relationship to the church as between a husband and wife. And we should note, especially we husbands, that it says 4 times that the husband should love their wife. It only says for the wives they should have respect for their husbands. I think you who listen tonight, who are a woman, have no problem associating you as a bride and Jesus as the groom, but maybe a little harder for us men to understand the fully of the bride. Nevertheless, in Revelation 21:9, it says, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, filled the 7 final plagues, came and spoke to me." Here is Evangelist John to see this. He said, "Come with me, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." And if we read further in Revelation, we see that the church is also described as a holy temple to the Lord. And we should see this text in relationship, in comparison with Ephesians chapter 2. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19, says following, "So then, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens of the saints and house of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. And the cornerstone is Jesus Christ himself. In him the whole building is joined together and grows into a holy temple in the Lord. In him you two, together with the others, are built to a dwelling place of God in the Spirit." The new Jerusalem is built on the foundation or doctrine of the apostles. And the work of the apostle was to lay a foundation of the church of Jesus Christ. And if you read further in Revelation 21, from verse 15 to 17, we will see that the new Jerusalem is measured in equal length, width, and height. And perhaps that is what Paul means when he described in Ephesians 3:18 that together with all the saints, that we may be able to comprehend what breadth and length and height and depth are. Another thing we should notice in Revelation 21, described in verse 2. "And I saw a holy city, the new Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, arrayed like a bride, beautiful and adorned for her husband." Notice here that the new Jerusalem, that we'll see the church, is descending. That means you can't descend if you not first have ascended. Like Jesus ascended to heaven, the bride will also be taken up to the heaven, and then we will be descendant together with our husband Jesus when he comes back to the earth. In conclusion, then, we can say that the Christian congregation is the bride, and that the new Jerusalem is the home of the bride or the believers. Okay, so then we go into topics number 2, engagement and the time leading up to the wedding. Engagement nowadays in the Western world is kind of preparation before the wedding itself takes place. It's a time when both parties want to get to know each other better, a preparation where the couple discuss a lot of practical things, where to live, type of home they want, what about finances and equipment to fill in the house, Can they afford that? Can they afford that? And starting a family, shall we do that right away? Shall we wait? And where shall the wedding take place? Who will be invited? And so on. So a lot of practical things. And also the engagement time is also time of both the man and the woman to see if they really love each other. So Paul describes us Christians as engaged to Christ. So if we read 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 2, I have betrothed you to one man, or engaged you to one man, to make a pure virgin for Christ. To be pure in the biblical sense means to be without blemish or error, that is sinless. But this is probably something we can all admit that we don't feel pure, but we feel maybe full of sin. We can't say that we are without fault. Being a pure virgin also means that no one had had a sexual contact, and many people do not feel very clean at that point either. So, in Ephesians 5:27 we can read, in the end of the 27, that he might present himself unto the church in glory, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing. This about being free of wrinkles is probably something the women know a lot about, because they have found methods to hide the wrinkles or kind of makeup. Well, we might be able to brush the wrinkle physically, but not the mentally or the spiritual wrinkles. How then can we be clean? Some believe and preach the church must go through the tribulation to be tried and found worthy enough. But let's look at Jesus' own word in John 15:3. What does it say? You are all clean because of the word which I have spoken unto you. You are all clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. I will also read 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. 1 Thessalonians 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and 9 to 10. I had to read from my Bible, small letters. 1 Thessalonians 1:9. For you remember, brethren, our labor and toil, for laboring night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. We preach to you the gospel. Your witness, and God also, how devotedly and justly and blameless we behaved ourselves among you who believe, as you know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of them as a father does his own children. I think that was the wrong reference. The reference I will say is that God has not appointed us to wrath, but I forgot where it is. But that's the one I will refer. God has not appointed us to wrath. So if Frank knows where it is, he can tell me during the teaching. So you see, I'm not blameless. without fault. Some also believe that the bride is only will be a selected flock of believers, those who really take their faith seriously, those who read the Bible daily, they pray, they fast and testify, and live daily in the light. That may not be the case when we read about the church in Corinth, where there was a lot of things to address for Paul. There were drunkenness, immorality, but remember what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 11:2. I have betrothed you to one man to make a pure virgin for Christ. When these Corinthians could be called pure virgins, then who among us believers cannot say the same thing? So I believe that all believers who have accepted Christ, born again, will be saved and raptured to heaven with Christ. If only a selection of us believers are to be a part of the rapture, then Jesus must break his engagement, because it says in the Bible that we are engaged with Christ. But there's no reference in the Bible that Jesus is unfaithful. It says actually in 2 Tim 2:13, if we are unfaithful, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Other Bible verses that emphasize this can be found in the description of Jesus as the head, as we a member of the body. In Colossians 1:18, says that he is the head of the body, which is the church. In our world, surgeons or doctors, they operate in our sick limbs, but not in the kingdom of God, where the limbs are healed. They are not chipped off. In 1 Corinthians 12-27 says that we are members of one body, and that Jesus is the head of the body. In 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Corinthians 12 and 12-27, I read only 21-22. And the eye is not able to say to the hand, I have not need for you, nor again the head of the feet, I have no need of you, but instead there is absolute necessity for the parts of the body that are considered the more weak. So, if Jesus is the head of the body, and you and I are part, you can't say when Jesus come and take us to the rapture to heaven, that he had to chop off that finger, that leg, because that was not pure enough, and just take the rest to heaven. I can't understand that. So in conclusion, I say that all believers who have accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior are betrothed to Christ and included in the coming of bride. So, number 3, where and when the wedding will take place. So now I will tell you a little bit of how a Jewish wedding was performed in the ancient time, in the time of Jesus. Because, as I said in the beginning, we had to understand how a Jewish wedding was performed, how the procedures were, and then we more can understand what Jesus meant by the bride and the groom and so on. First, in John 14, verse 2 and 3, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God and believe in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would tell you, because I am going over to make a place for you, and when I have made a place for you, I will come back and shall take you unto me, so that you can be where I am. So, Jesus, he went to heaven to make a place for us. And when he has completed, he will come back and take us where he is. And then we can be with him forever. So I will now go into detail of the Jewish wedding in ancient time, so you better understand and compare it with Jesus' own words. Then we will more understand. It's a kind of an analogy. So the Jewish wedding were in 3 parts. It happened in 3 acts. And the first act is the courtship, a proposal called Shiddushin in Hebrew. In that courtship, there was also a gift to be presented to the bride's father. There was also a contract called ketubah, and there was wine. And the second act is the engagement period called kiddushin, and the third act, the wedding itself, called nisuin. So I will go into these. How did they perform the courtship, the shiddushin? Well, we will go into this and see parallel to Jesus, what he explained and the church. So I have on the left the bride and the groom, and I will put Jesus' word on comparison on the right. The first is that the groom, he leaves his father's house and goes to the house of the woman he wants to marry. There the courtship takes place, or the proposal, according to a cultural pattern. And it's common that the man was carrying a gift or money to present. In a way, it's not that he bought the bride, but there was a custom that he had some kind of gift to present. And there was this marriage contract, the ketubah, and it was confirmed with wine, and that's very special. I will explain a little bit in detail how this was performed. Because he had brought wine, and he actually poured wine into a cup, and then he himself drank of that wine. And then he put showed the cup over to the woman he wanted to marry, and now it's very important for her. If she takes the cup and drink of the wine, she accepts the proposal. If she not drink the wine and put it back, her answer is no, I will not marry you. So let's say that she drank of the wine, and then the contract will be signed by both parties. Now it's very important. After they have signed the contract, so the first leg of the marriage settlement is now done. Now it's very interesting thing. Then the groom said the following. After they had drunk of the wine, he says, I will not drink of this wine until the upcoming wedding celebration. Just have that in mind. And then the waiting time before he comes and bring the bride was called kirushim. That's a kind of sanctification period. And he tell her that he will prepare a place for her. When he has completed, he will come back. But he didn't know when, because there was his father that decided when he should go back and bring the bride to the new home. I think you know, starting to understand the comparison here. What about Jesus and the church? We remember that Jesus left his Father's house to win the people for Christ, and it was his Father who sent him to earth to that we could be saved. And he didn't bring money or gift to buy the bride. He gave his own life for us, his own blood. He bought us free. And the marriage contract is the new covenant. And they confirm with wine. Then we have, if you go into the Lord's Supper, what did Jesus said in Matthew 20:26? I hope I have the correct reference this time. Matthew 26. And verse 29. Yeah. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit or of the wine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. You see the parallel? And when Jesus ascended to heaven, he said, I go back to my Father's house, and when I made a home for you, I will come back and bring you to where I am. And all over in the Bible, there's a lot of reference to say, be ready, because I don't know, Jesus didn't know when he will coming back to get his bride, only his Father. So here you see the parallel of the Jewish wedding, that the bridegroom leaves his father's house, and Jesus left his father's house. The groom paid money or gift to the bride, and Jesus paid with his own life. And there was a marriage contract, ketubah, and Jesus was the new covenant. And he confirmed with wine, and Jesus did the same in a communion. And they said the same, I will not drink of that until the wedding day, either for the Jewish wedding or in heaven when we have the wedding party. And also waiting time as sanctification. We should be prepared because we don't know when Jesus comes back. After the marriage, has become legal binding. The man leaves his bride and returns to his father's house. As I said, before he leaves, he makes the promise, I go back to my father's house. There I want to build a house for us, and when I've done that, I come back to you. He promised to return, because I will pick you up so you can be where I am. And you must wait for me and be ready when I get to you. The time of this should be unknown, but usually it was a year after the courtship. And as we mentioned this, and only the father knew the day when he will go back and get the bride. Now it's very interesting that when he comes to pick up the bride, he don't come announced, he come unannounced, preferable at night. And he was, in a way, he came and to steal his bride. And he would bring a chair, a carrier chair, it's called in Hebrew huppah. And the bride was put on this huppah and taken to the new home in the groom's father. Interesting here to note that it was not the groom but the father who gave the starting signal to his son. Now you can go and bring the bride home, because now the home is finished. And the groom with his friends leaves his father home to pick up the bride, and they were some torches or some lights in the night, and people, when they saw that, they took shouting, "The groom is coming, the groom is coming, the groom is coming. She's going to meet him." And here is also an interesting thing. The groom never went all the way to her house, but he stopped in a distance and waiting for the bride there. Then the bride walked out of the house and met the groom where he was waiting for her. And she was lifting up into this huppah and carried to the new home that the groom has made for her at his father's house. And also interesting, she was led by the groom into a chamber or a cottage that was made available for her purpose. And in this cottage, the bride and the groom should be alone for 7 days. Here the two are sexually united and hence legally married. After the 7 days, the couple came out and appeared in public. The bride took off her veil so everyone could see her and see who she was. Parallel to the marriage covenant between Jesus and his bride, the congregation is as follows. As the groom went home to his father's house, Jesus went home to his Father's house, God in heaven. And as the groom promised to return and bring the bride to his home, Jesus also promised to return and bring us back to his house. And only the Father knew the day, and also Jesus says, "I don't know the day, nor the angels, only my Father knows the day." And Jesus also promised to bring the bride home, so same as the groom. And here we have a comparison. They had 7 days alone in the marriage chamber, and we will spend 7 years with Jesus in heaven during the tribulation period. And after that, Jesus and the bride, the church, descended to earth so everyone could see him and the church. Like the bride took off her veil after the 7 days so everyone could see the bride. Now, try to put yourself in the situation like a bride. Imagine that the groom says, "It will take some time before I come and bring you home and we have this wedding, but you have first to go through 7 years of hard trials and affliction." Does that sound promising? Would you marry a person who said that? Well, let's see in 1 Thessalonians 4:17-18. It says, "Then we who are alive and remain on the earth will simultaneously be caught up or raptured together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And then we will forever be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort and encourage one another with these words." Is there any comfort or encouragement of going through 7 years tribulation? Does that make any sense? As the wait for the bride to the groom came in a preparation time, so it's also important for us in waiting for the groom. In 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1, 2 Corinthians 7:1, when we have these promises, my loved ones, let us cleanse ourselves from all impurity upon flesh and spirit and consume our sanctification in godliness. And in 1 Thessalonians 5:23, 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 23, may he himself, God of peace, sanctify you all the way through, and may your spirit, soul, and body be preserved perfect, blameless by the coming of the Lord Jesus. So, as I said, as the newly wedding couple were alone 7 days in the chamber or a cottage, so will we, as Jesus' bride, be 7 years alone with Jesus in heaven. So that will be a very nice wedding party. And as the bridal couple came out from the hut after the 7 days, we will descend to the earth together with Jesus after the 7 years. And the lesson of this analogy is Jesus comes unannounced. No one knows the day or hour to pick up his ward, his bride. And he does not come down to the earth where the congregation lives. He descends into the sky, and there we meet the bride. There we meet the bride and groom. As we just read in 1 Thessalonians 4:7-18, just repeat it. Then we who are alive and remain on the earth will simultaneously be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. As we saw the first, and the bridegroom didn't went all the way to the house, but the bride came out and they met on the way and was taken to the marriage party. And the congregation is brought with Christ home to our Father to celebrate wedding. In the heavenly bridal chamber or cottage, the congregation and Christ are fully united. And after 7 years, Jesus leaves heaven and goes to earth, where he puts his feet on the Mount of Olives, in the same place his feet left the earth 2,000 years ago. And he got his bride with him, and that's you and me. And the congregation will leave the earth and will be in heaven for 7 years, when God's judgment passes upon a sinful world, the so-called tribulation period. So this was a comparison of the Jewish wedding, and I think it's very interesting and important for us, because then we can better understand this second coming of Jesus and this wedding and where to take it place. So, can we move up to the last? Who is invited to the wedding party? Well, we have actually taught a little bit of that in the first 3, but I will just go through some verses. In Matthew 24:44, you also must be ready, therefore, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not expect him. So the warning from Jesus says, be prepared, be ready. And this is something Jesus mentioned again and again in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke. We can see also in Matthew 24:45 to 46. Who then is the faithful, thoughtful, and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of his household, to give to the others the food and supplies at the proper time. And blessed, or happy, fortunate, and invited is that servant whom, when his master comes, he find so doing. So we had to be faithful, thoughtful, and wise servant, because we don't know when the master comes. And in Mark 13:23, but look to yourself and be on your guard, because I have told you everything beforehand. Be on your guard, be prepared. And in Luke 21:28, when Jesus has mentioned all the different things that will happen in the end times, that we should be aware of the time we live in. He says, now when these things begins to occur, look up and lift your heads, because your redemption or deliverance is drawing near. When these things begin to occur. So we have to be aware of everything what's happened in our world, with famine, war, rumors of war, catastrophic weather changes and so on. It's a kind of warning for us that we should be prepared, that the day is soon coming. And in Luke 21:34-36, but take heed to yourself and be on your guard, lest your hearts be overburdened and depressed with the giddiness and headache and nausea of self-indulgence, drunkenness and worldly worries, and care pertaining to business of this life, so that the day may come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come upon all who live upon the face of the entire earth. Keep awake then, and watch at all time. Be discreet, attentive, and ready, praying that you may have the full strength and ability, and be accounted worthy to escape all the things taking place, that will take place, and to stand in the presence of the Son of Man. To be worthy, to escape all the things that will take place. And here Jesus referred to the tribulation period, that we should escape all these things, because God has not meant us for wrath, but salvation in Christ. To escape all these things that will happen. And the last reference in Bible, Revelation 3:10. Because you have guarded and kept my word of patient endurance, have held fast to the lesson of my patience with the expectant endurance I give you, I also will keep you safe from the hour of trial, testing, which is come on the whole world to try those who dwell upon the earth. So notice here it says, I will keep you safe from the hour of trial, not through the hour of testing or trial. This is the 7 year of tribulation. That I will keep you safe from the tribulation, not through the tribulation. It was short teaching, a lot of Bible, but I think you need to understand how the wedding in Jewish time, in the ancient time, was performed, and then it's easier for us to understand Jesus' word when he do the comparison of the wedding between a man and a woman. So, thank you for listening. God bless you all.